They said the bell of St. Bartholomew's could be heard from ships easing up the Severn River, that its tone cut through fog and rain like a blade through silk. Sailors took it for a good omen. Parishioners called it God's breath. But in the autumn of 1734, when Father Thomas Thornton came to Havenwood with a smile that never reached his eyes, the bell began to sound like a warning no one was ready to hear. Havenwood was small by the reckoning of the Chesapeake, 800 souls threaded between red clay roads and tobacco furrows, wealth pooled in a few Catholic houses with names that carried weight: Curthers, Ashford, Whitmore. Their ships moved leaf and sugar and human lives through a trade most pious men preferred not to describe too exactly. The church stood at the town's heart like a clenched fist, brick-walled, plain-glassed, heavy-bellied with its tower. The sanctuary smelled of oak and beeswax, and whatever people bring when they kneel: guilt, hope, the sweet rot of secrets. Thornton arrived with European polish and colonial instinct. Nearly 6 feet, hair gone prematurely silver, eyes the cold blue of winter river ice, he preached in a voice that smoothed splinters from the conscience. He spoke of discipline and mercy, of sin as a room with a door that could be unlatched if one simply said the right words to the right ear. He asked to renovate the confessionals, for the dignity of the sacrament. 4 new booths appeared within weeks: dark oak, carved crosses, a sheen of devotion on every surface. Parishioners touched the polished rails and said the new wood seemed to drink their sorrows more completely. Beneath the floor the wood drank more than sorrow. Marcus Thornton, the priest's elder nephew, a carpenter with a gifted hand and a bent imagination, had threaded the booths with tin throats that fed the penitent's whisper into a chamber below. There curved plates of metal gathered sound into clarity. There Samuel, young, patient, ordained by Baltimore's good grace, sat for hours with ink and cipher, turning shame into script, script into leverage, leverage into coin. On a Tuesday in February of 1735, Richard Whitmore knelt to that soft lattice and emptied himself. A prosperous merchant with a reputation engraved on Sunday smiles, he spoke Catherine's name as if it could unmake him. 19 years old, indentured, a face he could not stop seeing even in prayer. He confessed the plan to buy her contract, to make the sin look like providence. Father Thornton's hand moved in blessing. His voice soothed like warm water. "There is forgiveness for every wound," he said, and prescribed a penance stitched from prayers and charity. A week later, in a study lit by reluctant candles, the priest suggested a fund for young women in difficulty. £50 to begin, then 10 each month. Not extortion, never that. A sacrament of generosity. "God has revealed to me your desire to serve," he said, and Whitmore felt something cold settle at the base of his skull. He paid, telling himself he was saving a soul. He paid again when asked, and then again, because what is money beside reputation, beside marriage, beside the delicate weave of a name? The machine purred. Elsewhere, at St. Michael's in Easton and St. Joseph's near Chestertown, identical oak booths took root, tin throats sank through joists into hidden rooms, and the cipher multiplied. The Thorntons learned not to fish every stream. They studied currents, waited for fat trout, adultery, embezzlement, undermeasured cargo, the convenient disappearance of a tenant farmer who had seen the wrong ledger at the wrong hour. They never demanded. They invited. A contribution to the mission. A gift for the poor. The donor signed with relief, believing generosity had made him clean. It is a genius of certain crimes that they allow the victim to consider himself righteous. Havenwood changed without admitting it had. Sermons thickened with images of hidden rot and divine fire. Confession became as common as breath. Men attended Mass with the intensity of gamblers riding a last bet. Whitmore, once jovial and hale, grew thin around the eyes. Edmund Curthers woke at midnight to count crates he'd already counted 3 times. Collection chests grew heavy. The bell rang. In the winter of 1736, a mind turned toward the altar with a scholar's suspicion. Isabella Ashford, 19, fluent in Latin and French, quick-eyed and inconveniently intelligent, confessed trifles and waited to see them bloom in Sunday admonitions. She borrowed a silk handkerchief she had not borrowed, and the next week Father Thornton preached against petty theft. She invented a fondness for a married merchant. By Tuesday, her father was counseled on the urgency of securing her a proper husband. Then she lied on a larger scale, claiming to have overheard a scheme to misdeclare cargo as devotional goods to cheat customs. Within days, the priest asked for a private audience with James Ashford about the spiritual dangers of trade with a careless conscience. A pattern becomes a verdict when tested. Isabella did not bring her suspicions to the altar. She wrote letters instead, one for Bishop Carroll in Baltimore, one for the governor, one for her cousin Thomas, a magistrate in Annapolis. She described the booths, the sermons, the donations, the priest's slippery eyes. She locked the letters in a servant's trunk with instructions that they fly the instant she failed to call them home. During the Lenten retreat, while most of Havenwood prayed in Annapolis, Isabella crossed the churchyard under a sky the color of pewter and opened the side door with the caretaker's borrowed key. In the basement she found the throat room, walls veined with metal, a desk with neat stacks of ciphered confessions, cabinets of transcripts cross-referenced by family and sin. She turned the pages slowly, 3 years of Havenwood unbuttoned and inventoried, dockets of donations noted by month and usefulness. A separate file marked by unknown signs listed parishioners who had become obstacles. Several had died of illnesses that came on sudden and fierce. In a locked drawer, a glass vial of white powder waited with patient malice. Arsenic has many names. In Isabella's reading, it had been called inheritance powder. Father Thornton measured a portion with a surgeon's care and sealed the rest before climbing back up the stairs. That week, Richard Whitmore took the host at Sunday Mass and collapsed at home by midnight. Breath hitching, stomach turning itself inside out, skin graying at the edges like damp paper. Dr. Benjamin Crawford called it putrid fever. Isabella wrote another letter and added what she had seen. The servant held the bundle like a live coal. 2 men watched the Ashford house at dawn. Isabella, dressed with steady hands, walked out to them and spoke loudly enough for neighbors to hear that she wished to meet Father Thornton at 2 o'clock in the sanctuary to discuss spiritual matters and certain documents he would find edifying. She spent the hours until noon weaving a net of witnesses. Her cousin, the magistrate, the puzzled physician, Margaret Whitmore, whose grief had already hardened into a brittle, useful rage, and most importantly the bishop, drawn down from Baltimore by letters he had wanted to disbelieve. The church was cool as a cellar. Light fell in pale ribbons through the plain glass, laying bars across the pews. Father Thornton waited by the altar with his winter water eyes and that practiced warmth. Isabella stood where her voice would carry through the nave. She told him what she knew in the language of accusation and proof. He answered in the language of habit and contempt. "My dear child," he said, "your imagination has become a spiritual problem. Let us speak within the sacrament." "I will not," she said, steady as a scaffold. "I will speak here in the open to the man who records confessions, extorts donations, and poisons those who become inconvenient." Something in him bared its teeth. "You meddle in matters beyond you. We secure the church's survival in a hostile country. Loyalty is purchased. Treachery is disciplined. Heaven's work is not always gentle." "You mean the church survives when its enemies pay," she said, "and dies when they refuse?" "You are an unmarried girl with dangerous ideas," he said, stepping closer. "You will withdraw your slanders. Otherwise the world will discover you poisoned Mr. Whitmore. They will discover arsenic among your chemical projects. Tomorrow you will be found in your bed with a note of remorse and a soul beyond salvation. Your father's business will crumble. Your engagement will end. Havenwood will forget you in a month and praise me on Sunday. You've made a single miscalculation," she said, raising her voice so it rang under the beams. "I didn't come alone." Bishop Carroll stepped from behind the altar's screen with his face arranged into grief and iron. Magistrate Ashford emerged from a side aisle. 2 armed men filled the doorway. Dr. Crawford stood pale but resolute. Margaret Whitmore's hands were clenched white around her handkerchief. For a heartbeat, the sanctuary held the sensation of a trap springing shut. "Thomas Thornton," the bishop said, voice formal and old. "By the authority of Holy Church, I strip you of your office." "Magistrate, do your duty." The priest moved like a snake striking tall grass. He lunged toward a cabinet and yanked free a hidden blade. The pistol's report cracked the nave, roared up into the tower, shook dust from the joists. The knife clattered. Thornton folded to the stones, mouth a thin, surprised O, blue eyes looking at nothing at last. He chose his judgment. the magistrate said, lowering the smoking barrel.